Hi again then guys, and welcome to of course another specific car breakdown from GT Sport, and this time once again it's in the world of GT Masters, which is the kind of GT style race cars, sometimes bordering on touring car but not quite, because that has its own series as well. And this one you could say kind of falls somewhere between those two and kind of in both camps to some degree. It's got kind of an N24 or GT24 race car kind of vibe, and that car is of course the Toyota 86, the Group 4 racing version. Now, the Toyota 86 is not typically the kind of car that you'd think of when it comes to setting the best lap times. It's a good little sports car, it's a good successor to the iconic AE86, but it's more of a fun sports car than a fast one. It's kind of like Toyota's equivalent of the Mazda MX-5, much more budget-friendly, smaller, underpowered, or at least modestly powered sports car, which is more about the fun of driving and, as I said, getting that performance on a budget. That doesn't typically bleed over into track day cars that much, but that's not to say that you can't make it into one, because of course we've already looked at this car in its rally form, the Group B rally car, and it's great. It makes a brilliant Group B rally car, one of the best in the game overall, I would say. So what about in this category of Group 4? Well, in terms of the spec, it's pretty much where you'd expect it to be. In some ways, the power, for instance, is 358 horsepower, 273 pound-feet of torque, still from a 2-litre engine. But one way in which it might surprise you in maybe a slightly underwhelming way is the weight. It does weigh quite a lot more than you might expect. In comparison to something like an Alpha 4C, for instance, which doesn't weigh that much more than 1,000 kilos, this weighs 1,200. And considering that the road car is about 1,230 kilos anyway, that's not a huge drop for this one to make. It's only 30 kilos lighter, given that it's fully stripped out, it's race spec, etc. So in other words, it has some existing ballast. That much you can safely assume, and of course with balance of performance, any race car in any class can change significantly, of course. So with balance of performance applied, anything can change on any track with any driver, of course, and there are certain cars which people go to. In Group 4, for instance, stuff like the Megane tends to be a very popular choice. Without balance of performance, say in career mode as an example, again, things are completely different there, or in an online lobby or in a custom event that you make yourself, the car can change its characteristics and its specs all over the place. Now, just like with the Veyron in Group 4 as well, and a couple of other heavier sports cars, you can drop the weight on this one even more compared to stock. But what is it like in its stock form? What does it give you to work with? Is it tail happy like the road car, or is it actually kind of an underdog, which is somewhat of a sleeper in the racing car world? Well, I would say it's somewhere in between. It's not a dominating force, at least from my experience of driving it. It doesn't feel like it's going to wipe the floor with Vipers and Corvettes anytime soon, but it definitely is not as playful as the road car. Now, with more downforce, with racing tyres, with lower weight, you'd hope that all of those things would contribute toward that, but it's nice to know that they do, because sometimes a race car can still be a handful. For instance, something like a TVR Speed 12 GT1 car, or a Lister Storm race car, for instance. Not that the Lister Storm is a bad handling car, it just has similar characteristics in Gran Turismo 2, for instance, to how good the road car already felt. So there isn't always a massive change between road going and race day cars in Gran Turismo. On this occasion, thankfully, there is. It's far less tail happy. It's still got a bit of that in there, but far less than stock. It's got a ton of grip, a ton of downforce, and it's naturally compact. In fact, in some cases, it's one of the most compact cars in this whole category, along with stuff like the Alpha 8C, or 4C I should say, because these days even hot hatches are getting bigger. So stuff like the Scirocco and the Megane, they're not exactly small cars anymore, whereas the 86 does feel pretty small, again with the MX-5 connection. And if I recall correctly, I think there was actually an MX-5 Group 4 car in the beta of the game, which of course is no longer in the game, so that's kind of a shame. It would have been a great rival for this one. In terms of value, well, that's the interesting thing about Group 4. There is arguably more variation in terms of the cars included in Group 4 and the kinds of cars that are all put together than there is in any other class. Because if you think about it, Group 2, currently at least, is all Super GT. Group 3 is predominantly GT3 cars in one form or another, sometimes not quite GT3 but close enough, and of course Group 1 you've got prototypes and concept Vision GTs, so it's pretty limited. Most of them are fairly obvious results. Then you get to Group 4. You've got small sports cars, you've got hot hatches, you've got full-on supercars in the form of something like a Veyron. You've got super sports cars like the Viper and the Corvette. It really is all over the place. It's one of the only places in the game where you could see a Toyota 86, a Viper, a Veyron, a Corvette, a BMW M4 and a Renault Megane all in the same race and legitimately rivaling each other because of the specs and because of the class and where the tuning either improves the car to, such as in the case of something like this, or decreases the car to, in the case of a Viper or a Ferrari or a Veyron. So in some ways, having a car like this which is scaled up to Group 4 can be an improvement over scaling down something like a Viper to Group 4, where you're really neutering that 8.4 litre engine, whereas this one, 350 or 360 horsepower, close enough, is significantly higher than stock, so it's leaps and bounds better in terms of performance than the road car would be. Now of course, as I said, balance of performance can change that. They could add a ton of weight, they could drop the power, but it's a good place to be when the car is improving up to the category rather than being detuned down into it, like the other cars that I mentioned. In terms of the overall ability of this one, it's not the best thing out there, but I would say it's one of the better choices for less experienced drivers. It's a very forgiving car. The fact that it is so compact in particular means it's very good for very tight technical circuits, and as long as there aren't too many wide open straights, it's a good choice to go for as an all-rounder. The acceleration is good enough, the handling is good, the brakes are pretty good, the grip is good. Of course the pricing is the same as all of the others anyway, so value is fairly constant in Group 4, 350,000 credits. So yeah, if you are a Toyota 86 fan, even just because it's the successor to the Truno, then it's worth a look, because it is a good little car. Like I said, don't necessarily expect it to dominate the category, but it definitely has the makings of a car that could win if you use it under the right circumstances, like the Mazda MX-5 could, like the Alfa 4C Group 4 car can, and various others too. But that's it for this review overall, of course. I will see you guys next time. Personally, I would love to see a Group 3 version of the Toyota 86, like a GT3 car. I think that would be pretty awesome, but of course we'll have to wait and see for stuff like that. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.